Ember Witch. Book 1. The Lich. Volume 1. Black Tragedy. Chapter 3. Half-Blood. October 21st to December 21st, 458 BME. Fragment 21. Blood Blade. Ren sat with his back against the wall, focusing his color deeply into the puddle of blood that laid at his feet. It bubbled and spattered as the iron separated itself from the red liquid. It hovered for a moment and began forming together. The amount of blood that he was working with would form no more than a needle, but he needed his practice before the clan performed the ritual together. As the most talented mage of the group, he had been appointed to be the leader of this ritual. They had attempted it once before with animal blood, but the iron couldn't contain its form for longer than a few minutes. This ritual would require far more blood from Rin. He guessed they would have to slaughter at least 40 people in order to have enough blood to form the blade. It would then need to be fired and shaped by a blacksmith. The Noki had given them the specifications on exactly what the sword should be shaped like and even the intricate detailing it would have, but making such a sword was out of the realm of his knowledge. He knew only a few blacksmiths, and none of them were skilled enough for the task. He had no idea how they were going to perform the ritual and forge the blade within 2 months, but he had to try. The Elven King had promised to pay the clan not only in gold but legitimate status as a church. Despite the history of the Elven and Vera worship, the king promised that they would once again rebuild the great temples and re-establish the church. Haru was clearly putting too much faith in the Elven, but the chance to once again be able to openly worship the Dark Mother as a legitimate god in the eyes of the church was far too tempting to not trust in Haru's judgment. He had seen the hypocrisy of the priestess firsthand. The church was not practicing the ideals of Vera. Instead they chose to ignore the tenets that they saw as unnecessary. Rape, murder, sacrifice, and death were parts of her teachings, just as much as kindness and mercy were to the Church of the Gods. It had already been a week since the Noki had agreed to another 2 months, and he had to make sure he was able to perform the ritual perfectly before he could lead the 21 clan members in a full-scale attempt. The iron formed together with a snap, then dropped to the ground, landing in the pile of steaming blood. He reached down and picked it up, hoping that it would retain its shape this time. He watched closely as the needle shook in his hand, then immediately stopped. He held it up to his eye and smiled as the metal glinted in the candle light.
Keep your hand steady. Your grip will be less strong than what your right hand could manage, but you have the ability to overcome,
Vera said, then slashed at Fevra with her transparent red long sword. Fevra blocked the attack clumsily, then sidestepped, pointing his stump out. A blue energy bolt fired from the silver cuff and Vera deflected it.
Good, use that as a surprise weapon. Mages who lose an arm can never cast with it again unless they have a binding object like that, but be careful, the more you use soul magic the quicker you run out of energy. Be mindful of your power. Your soul can only give so much before you die,
Vera said and slashed again. Fevra grunted as his blade met hers in a shower of red and blue sparks. He pushed back her attacks with a struggle, but he had enough knowledge of her fighting style to not be taken by surprise. He slid the blade down the edge of Vera's sword, then stepped forward, pushing his weight into her, which caused Vera to stumble back. She recovered quickly and leaped over a low sweep, then used her color to propel her further into the air. She flipped her body and planted her hands on his shoulders, then pushed off, flipping once more before she landed behind him. Fevra was knocked off balance, and before he could react, Vera had stabbed backwards, letting her blade puncture his skin before it evaporated into nothingness.
What the fuck was that?
He asked in surprise as he turned around.
That was you dying. Keep your guard up. Your color can augment your acrobatics if done correctly. Don't let anyone use their agility against you. You are several feet taller than any Fyern with far more body mass, but that puts you at a disadvantage when it comes to your agility,
Vera replied and dropped her aura. She stepped forward and placed her hand on his chest.
Remember that you were outsped by a fully trained Cinder. You have had far more training and experience than the mages we will face, but that doesn't mean that you are invincible. Pay attention to your opponent, read their color and exploit their weaknesses.
Vera continued, and Hana scoffed.
A one-handed mage is still more powerful than the pitiful lot we will be slaughtering,
Hana said, and stood up from the ground. The cold winter air, causing her breath to form misty clouds in front of her.
We are about a week away from Shinrin Keep. Get in as much practice as you like, but I assure you that it's not necessary. The clan can barely keep their color steady, let alone use it in combat. If we do this right, we will hit them while they sleep. They won't be able to react fast enough to warrant a retaliation. The only mage you will have to worry about is Ren, and he has never been trained in formal combat. Only his past as a cutthroat and rapist gave him an edge over his victims.
Hana explained as she adjusted the wood in the fire with a stick.
Even so, I need to practice with my left hand. Who knows what we will face in the future? The Elven are preparing for an invasion and my people are talented fighters. If I am to take you through the Evergreen, I need to be able to fight effectively. It's not likely that we will run into any Morin, but they prowl the forest and are 6 times the size of us at their smallest. Gods, just thinking about those damn spiders makes my skin crawl.
Fevra replied, dropping his color.
Fair enough, as long as you get me to the blade I can handle everything else.
Hana replied, not looking up from the fire.
And how's that? We are talking about a weapon that has the ability to control minds. The damn thing can speak, for Callus' sake. How on Haven can you manage something that steals magic and minds?
Fevra asked as he walked to the fire. He placed his hands close to blue flames and let the heat warm his body before Hana spoke again.
I know exactly what the blade can do. It has powers you wouldn't believe. When you wielded it, did it bleed a black acid that burned away the very ground you stood upon?
She asked, and Fevra looked at her with puzzlement.
How in the void could you know that?
He asked, and Vera approached the fire with the same expression.
Vera is the only god who actually listens to her creations. Have you ever had a dream so real, so vivid you believed that you were awake?
Hana asked, and Fevra thought for a moment.
When I was a pup, I would black out for hours. I would have terrible nightmares that caused me to break out in fevers. They never felt real in the sense that I believed I was conscious, but they were just real enough to cause me to wake violently when they were over.
Fevra replied, and Hana shook her head.
Not that. Although what I am talking about may have similar symptoms. You would know it if you experienced it.
Hana replied, then sat back down.
I have,
Vera said, and Hana looked up to her.
I was walking through a snow-covered forest just like this. I reached out my hands to touch a giant black rose, and as soon as I made contact, both of my arms disintegrated into ash. I began falling into a frozen lake and surfaced in a mirrored room where I watched my eyes disappear until there was nothing but darkness.
Vera continued, and Hana took a moment before she spoke.
That dream was a vision from Vera herself. Most visions are recurring dreams. They come and go as often as every night or once a year, but they are visions nonetheless. I have been dreaming of a great black crystal sword that bleeds black acid for 2 years. Once a week I am given a glimpse of this blade. Each time I hold on to sleep just a little longer to keep the vision from fading. Make sure, Vera, that when you dream this again you keep a record of it. She is trying to tell you something. It could be a warning, a glimpse at the past, or even your future. This sword is important somehow, it holds Vera's interest at the very least.
Hana said, pushing the coals around the fire.
You said that the blade has powers I wouldn't believe. What sort of power are we talking about? The ability to control minds, speak and bleed acid seems like it is powerful enough to bring armies to their knees. What other kind of power could it have?
Vera asked, and Hana laughed.
What if I told you it can teleport, vanish into thin air and appear somewhere else entirely?
Hana replied, now looking at both of them.
That's impossible. No magic can produce teleportation. Even the most talented mages in the world can't use magic to do that.
Fevra said, trying to wrap his head around the thought of such an act.
You say it's impossible, but yet you held the blade in your own hands. You felt its control over you. You were even able to lift it without any trouble. I'm betting that when your mutt pack attempted to move it they had to get several men to get it off the ground. Believe it or not, it can give its wielder the power to vanish, not simply turn you invisible but truly vanish.
Hana replied, and Fevra ran his hands over his eyes.
So what you're saying is that we break into the most guarded place in the entire Evergreen, a place that mind you is home to the Grand Mages, and take the sword then simply just vanish into thin air. How can you not see how ridiculous this sounds?
Fevra asked, and Hana laughed again.
I told you that you wouldn't believe me,
Hana replied. Vera sat back and thought about the history of magic. Every book she has scoured through. Every scroll she had ever read, and sighed.
Even this seems completely wrong in the grand scheme of things. I understand that you can use color to make things like fire, ice and lightning appear from thin air. Your soul can be used to create even more powerful spells if you are willing to shorten your lifespan, and you can raise the dead by manipulating a corpse, but teleportation? That alone breaks the physics of the universe. Things like gravity, momentum, energy are ever-present things. You can't simply defy those limitations just by swinging a sword around, no matter the size of it,
Vera said.
That is where you are wrong. Do you remember the stories of how the planet and moon were created? 5 gods so powerful and merciful created the ground we walk upon, the animals and plants we consume, the air we breathe, and every race that walks upon Haven. 4 of the gods, satisfied with their work, vanished into the darkness and spawned the sun. The last god, still not satisfied by what was made, ripped land itself from the planet and formed it into the moon, only leaving after spawning a horde of deadly creatures and plants for her siblings' creations to fight with for survival. Vera and the other gods had the ability to vanish. They could teleport. They created everything around us, then vanished like they had never been here in the first place. It is possible if you believe in the gods' power,
Hana said as she continued to stoke the fire. Both Vera and Fevra thought over her words as the sun set, shrouding the woods in darkness.
I count 20. That's half the components needed. There won't be enough blood to complete the ritual,
Ren said, and Haru sighed.
This is all we could gather in such a short time. We are few in numbers. We had to steal them in the night so as to not be caught by any of the Morden's guards. 20 sacrifices will be enough,
Haru said as they walked past a cart filled with firemen of all ages.
We have 2 weeks to forge the blade and another 2 weeks to have a blacksmith fire the metal. Are you sure we can pull this off?
Ren asked, and Haru placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping a few dozen paces from the cart.
It will be enough time if you begin tonight. I trust in your abilities. Put your faith in our goddess and she will guide you,
Haru said with a smile. Ren nodded and then turned to the cart and pulled his aura around himself. He stepped to the cage door and unlocked it, slowly swinging the door open. He reached inside and pulled out his first sacrifice. The child fought and screamed as he dragged her to the ground, then gestured for his fellow clan members to do the same. One by one, scared and screaming firemen were pulled from the cage and dragged into the keep's cellar. They tried to fight and struggle, but had little strength left due to the poison Haru had created that slowed their movements and dulled their minds. One by one, 20 innocent men, women, and children were dragged into the depths of the keep, where they were chained to the floor in a circle. They cried and pleaded for their freedom, but their captors didn't seem to listen. They sat before the symbol of the gods laid out on the stone floor. Composed of animal bones, the symbol spelled out their fate. Within the skulls of 6 deer lay candles that burned away wax, letting it melt down the sun-bleached surface.
You stand before greatness. Do not fear death, as the true goddess has granted you a mercy tonight. Brothers and sisters of darkness, tonight we create our future. Everything we have worked for all these years is just the beginning. We shall stand in the great temples once again. Our goddess will be known once again. May her presence be ever known. Tonight we create that which has been lost for centuries. Tonight we shall bathe in the blood of our sacrifices and be born the champions of darkness. By Vera's hands we were born, by Vera's hands we shall die,
Ren said as he stood in the center of the circle. By Vera's hands we were born, by Vera's hands we shall die, his clan repeated, and one by one the throats of 20 were slit. Their blood flowed like a river into the center of the circle. Ren stood ever taller, raising his color to its peak and pushed it out in a wave around him. The blast hit each of the 20 members, who in turn pushed out their color. The inky blackness of the room was washed away in a flash as sparks exploded outward. In the center of the room the blood of the innocent began to boil. Every drop was sucked from the bodies, leaving them a dry husk, which in the heat of the magic dissolved into ash. A singular moment in the late winter, but an eternity in the history of Valsala laid before him.
What the fuck is that?
Vera asked as all 3 hunters sat up.
Shit. Oh gods no.
Hana said as she flew from her bedroll and sprinted out of the tent. Vera and Fevra followed closely behind her as they traced the magic in the direction of the keep.
I thought they would have been destroyed the instant they attempted it,
Hana said in horror.
What are you talking about?
Fevra asked as he tried to tune out the immense amount of energy he could feel radiating from the broken castle that sat 3 days away from their position.
They are performing a ritual. A blood blade. In all the void they are actually succeeding,
Hana said with a shudder.
We have to go. We can't let them finish it.
Vera said, then turned to run back to the tent and her horse.
It's too late. The keep is 3 days away, we would never make it in time,
Hana replied.
How long does it take? If they finish the ritual they could set a plague upon the entire planet.
Fevra replied and stepped backwards.
It's a 20-hour process. We would still be 2 days away if we were to leave now. Besides, they already have the components. Even if they fail tonight they could start again the next day. There are 20 necromancers in that castle. If we storm in without a plan we will die. Even with our greater strength and color there are far too many of them. They would swallow us whole,
Hana replied, and Vera scoffed.
What should we do then? Just sit here with our thumbs in our asses? If they finish the ritual and forge that blade we would have worse things to worry about than the elven invasion. We are talking about a weapon that rendered an entire race extinct in the matter of weeks. What would that plague do to the fire if they unleashed it upon us? Millions will die if we don't do anything,
Vera said as she filled with rage.
You're right, millions will die, but if we charge in now we risk being unable to even fight. We run our horses to death and exhaust ourselves so that when we arrive all they have to do is cast a single spell to kill us. We need to stick to the plan. Go in under the cover of darkness, kill silently. Use our superior talents against them,
Hana replied and turned around to look at her.
Look, it's already too late to stop them from performing the ritual, but it's not too late to stop them from using the blade. We are 3 days away. If this ritual takes 20 hours to perform, then that gives us 2 days to reach the castle before they could gather their supplies and leave. Moving 20 people isn't impossible within the time frame, but rather risky in the snow. They will need at least a week after the ritual in order to gather enough supplies and food, along with getting their rest from exerting so much magic at once. We will leave at dawn and ride through the night, taking our rest the next day in order to have enough strength to face anything they have,
Fevra said, and both Hana and Vera nodded.
That is the best option we have. I doubt any one of us will get sleep tonight, so let's prepare the camp for the morning,
Hana said, then walked towards the tent. Vera followed close behind, leaving Fevra at the edge of the hill as the surges of energy reverberated through the cold air.
I have received word that the other holds have had no other necromantic sightings or activity. As Hana had explained, they were few in number and hit each hold attempting to gather as many bodies as they could before they headed towards Shinrin Keep. I assume that Vera, Fevra and Hana will be reaching the keep within the week. We should have one less problem to deal with by the end of winter.
Neela said, her head bowed as she kneeled at Kaisha's feet.
Good, and what of the elven spy?
Kaisha replied as she sat leisurely on her throne.
I am sorry to report that there have been absolutely no sightings of an elven within the east. I am afraid that person may have been lying in order to save his life.
Neela replied, not looking up from her bow.
What do you know of the elven? Specifically the different races of elven?
Kaisha asked, then crossed her legs.
I don't know much about them, to be honest, Your Grace. The stories I had read as a child seemed too outrageous to believe as an adult. Eyes that caught fire, teeth perfect and beauty outstanding. Nonsense like that.
Neela replied, finally looking up at Kaisha.
Stories come from a place of truth no matter how ridiculous they may be. For instance, the Sol Elven are said to never get cold in the winter. As if their skin was made of fire itself. An obvious lie but laced with truth. The Arachnim were said to be able to see in the dark like us but also use a form of echolocation to essentially never have to use their eyes. And as for the Noki Elven, they are able to turn themselves into trees. They are the Elven's best spies, the best at stealth and the masters of nature. We haven't heard or seen an Elven within the East because we have been looking for a person,
Kaisha said, and Neela stood up.
You can't be serious. How in the gods would we locate someone who can turn themselves into trees? There are hundreds of woodlands within the Heartland. It would be impossible to tell which tree is a tree and which one an elven.
Neela replied, trying to make sense of what she had been told.
Exactly. The Elven wouldn't want to be known while pushing a clan of necromancers into action. I believe now more than ever that Takashi was directly working with a Noki Elven to further the experiments of the necromancers. They were hoping that the creation of a blood blade would cause panic within our cities. Panic would cause violence and violence would weaken the system. With a plague ravaging the fire, the Elven could storm in and wipe us out without any resistance. I believe the Elven has a plan for each race. The Orsin, the Lyran, the humans and the Firn. Weaken the system by using the people's fears against them. The Orsin pride themselves on their strength. Once every few years they gather for a tournament. Take away their pride by defeating their leaders one by one and the weakest will scatter to rebuild their clans. The Lyran seem to hold law in high regard even if outside powers force their hands to break the laws. Once the Elven destroys the other races, the Lyran would be forced to follow a new law or be destroyed as well, and finally the humans. The only race to be completely unable to use color. Simply crush them with military might and take their city as their own,
Kaisha explained as Neela weighed the words carefully before she spoke.
What makes you this certain? I believe that the Elven have a plan, but why would they ever work with necromancers? They were the ones to outright destroy the Church of Vera.
Kaisha nodded, then pulled a note from her throne and gestured for Neela to take it.
This was pulled from a raven not that long ago. Seems like it was rather urgent, don't you think?
She asked as Neela took the note and began reading it.
They were asking about Takashi directly and even mentioned a Noki Elven. By the gods, how did you get this?
Neela asked in shock.
I had a scout report seeing the same raven flying over his post on multiple occasions. So I had it shot it down the next time he saw it. Turns out that our necromancer friends are directly involved with the Elven invasion,
Kaisha said, then took the note back and placed it back on the arm of her throne.
If that is true, could Vera and Fevra be walking into a trap? Perhaps Hana is a part of this.
Neela replied, and Kaisha shook her head.
I doubt Hana has anything to do with the necromancer's plot. I had a few informants gather everything they could about her. She had been in myopia for years, never even leaving the lower districts. However, Vera may be walking into an encounter with our Elven spy. With Takashi gone, there is no middleman. They would need to contact them on their own,
Kaisha replied, and Neela sighed.
We will have to wait until they send word of their mission. I have faith that they will succeed, but with the possibility of the Elven being there, they could be in for a rough time,
Neela said, then turned around.
Let's hope for everyone's sake that you are right,
Kaisha said before Neela walked out of the throne room.